Good morning. Hi, I'm Frank Messina, and this is the December 5th, 2023 meeting of the Chatham Historical Commission. Before we begin, I have a couple of quick announcements. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be available shortly hereafter for scheduled and on-demand viewing on any smartphone or tablet device. If anyone else is recording the meeting, please notify the chairman. Seeing none. Pursuant to Governor Healey's March 29, 2023, signing of the Act of 2023, extending certain provisions of the COVID-19 measures adopted during the state of emergency, suspended certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law 30A20, until March 31st, 2025. This meeting of the Chatham Historical Commission is being conducted in person and via remote participation. Every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately address the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so by calling the phone number 508-945-4410. Conference ID 718-236-005#. Or join the meeting online via Microsoft Teams through the link on the posted agenda. While this is a live broadcast and simulcast on channel Chatham TV, despite our best efforts, we may not be able to provide for real-time access. We will post a record of this meeting on the town's website as soon as possible. Thank you very much. I apologize for the mask. I'm in the last day of the protocol, and my glasses keep fogging up. So we will proceed. The first item of business is the roll call. Bob Lear.
Here.
Steve Burlingame. Steve is absent. Stephanie Hamilton.
Here.
Oh, boy, got an old one here. Sandy Porter.
Here.
Janet Tennyson. Don Aikman.
Here.
Robert Stevens.
Here.
And the chair is here. We have a quorum. We have 2 members missing. As a result, Mr. Stevens, who is an alternate, will not only participate in the discussion, but also will be a voting member of the meeting today. Okay. The ones in the meeting are the old ones in the thing. Thank you very much. Okay, just quickly, we have the minutes of December 21st, 2023. That was our marathon 2.5-hour meeting. Hopefully everybody had a chance to take a look at them. Minutes. Any questions or comments, additions, deletions?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Second by Ms. Hamilton. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll do a quick roll call. Bob?
Yes.
Steph?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And
And
the
can I say that the minutes, wow, what a good job you guys did. That was a nightmare.
And the chair votes yes.
Sorry.
Yeah, you captured that extended discussion on Main Street. That was a doozy. Thank you very much. Okay, I see Mr. Riley has joined us, so we will follow the agenda. The first item on the agenda is a public hearing, application 23060, heard in accordance with Chapter 158, 14 Pondview Lane, and unfortunately, this is a full demolition. We had a site visit yesterday. Hopefully, those of you who did not attend the site visit had a chance to look at the property. I originally thought that we had heard this application before, but we had not. I know we were involved, I think Don and I, other people, relative to the age of the house. This property, although it wasn't 75 years when we previously looked at it. It will be turning 75, and that's the reason it's here. There is a Form B for the property, even though it's not in the National Register District. And we got an error in the summary. There is a Form B. The house goes back to the 40s or 50s. So having said that, Mr. Riley?
Good morning, Bill Riley on behalf of the applicant. So we believe this property, which is famous because the chairman of the Historic Business District Commission grew up there. But other than that, I don't think there's historical significance to the building. It was originally built in, we think, 47. And then in 1957, they added a section on the back, adding 10 feet to the depth of the building. But again, given the age of the building and the style, we just don't think there's historical significance to the building.
That's it?
That's it.
Okay. Like I said, there is a Form B on the property, and it was reviewed by our preservation consultant, Eric Dre, in 2016. And in my own opinion, there's no question, it's a small, small structure in an area that had small structures, but there are a lot of changes going on in that area, unfortunately. So I guess it's a question relative to the historical significance of the property, which I guess we can address in terms of comments from any members of the commission who would like to speak. Mr. Lear?
Could I just ask, regarding the shed, it seems to me we were out there before to opine on whether the shed was historically significant, and I assume that's getting demolished too, just so we cover everything.
Yes, it is. And my understanding of the conversation that took place yesterday on site was that the issue of the shed had been brought before the commission, and it was determined not to be historically significant. That was my understanding from the conversation.
Well, I assume would like a order from the commission that neither the house nor the shed is historically significant.
That's correct. Thank
Okay.
you.
Okay. I guess, Bill, you included in the application some drawings. Now, you went to zoning, and zoning rejected it or allowed you to make some changes. So this is going to be going back. So these are not the final drawings.
No, but it's going to be very similar. They're reducing the height a little bit, and they're narrowing the building a little bit, but the basic design remains the same.
Yeah. Yeah, I think, although that, personally, the question of historical significance is, we go either way on it. I think, there's no question in my mind, what they're proposing in that area is significantly different than what was there. And in terms of what the property, what the general tenor of the community of that particular area. So I have concern about it. I mean, it's obviously not a Cape House, but, I'm sure you're going to correct me. We don't have any jurisdiction relative to what you put up, but I think the concerns of the personally is, the mass and the structure of that house, and just from what was there is just significantly different. So that's my own personal opinion.
Well, you'd be happy to know that the design meets the design criteria dimensionally of our current bylaw, which is what they design to these days.
Yeah, I know. Unfortunately, that's not what we're about. That's
No, I
the
understand
zoning
that,
board.
but-
The Historical Commission is more concerned, not necessarily with the bylaw as it relates to what the law is. There is no law that tells you how to design a house. I guess we're not in Nantucket, it's not an historic district, you know, where we could tell you what color to paint the front of the door. So we rely upon moral suasion, if you will, Bill, to try and encourage people when they are coming to Chatham, you know, see what's here, and to be somewhat consistent with the sense of place in Chatham. And that's where, you know, personally, I have problems. I know the commission does have problems too. And whether the zoning board says you meet the law or not is immaterial, you know, as far as my concerns with the historical commission. It's just a different, it's what we're about, you know. Okay, having said that, anybody else have any comments? Go around the room. Sandy?
I understand why they want to take the building down. It's on an adequate piece of property. It's just, that's a lot of house for that. But I hate to see it go, but I have no objection.
Thank you. Steph?
I agree with Sandy. I hate to see it go, but I have no objection.
You know,
Ron?
it's really very cute, too. I mean, I appreciate it, and I wish it could be moved somewhere.
We've talked a long time about having a pattern book, but we so far don't have one. But certainly, the design is not, in my mind, is not in keeping with the historic character of Chatham, but there isn't anything we can do.
Do you have the book that I asked for? We don't have a pattern book. Could you give it to Mr. Riley? We don't have a pattern book yet, but the Historical Commission, working with
Thank you.
Ellen Briggs of the POP, P-O-P, received some funding and is actually working on generating a pattern book. We tried to do that about 15 years ago with Len Sussman before the Community Preservation Committee, God bless him, rejected his application, and we never did it. And we hope to, at least working with the POP group, you know, to provide something like that. But it's the same thing, Don. We don't have any authority. The only thing we could do was I just gave Mr. Riley our book, you know, that you were instrumental in generating a sense of place. Let me have the other copy for Christina. And, you know, and I know they're fighting, you know, this zoning board, but we hope that when we did this years ago, we could give people who are coming to Chatham what it's all about and maybe get some ideas on where they can build even a large house, but still meet the intent.
I couldn't agree more.
I know, Bill, I'm not arguing the point, I'm just trying to make, you know, comment to Dodd's
Yeah.
point. Bob?
I agree with the sentiments expressed. I don't think we have a discretion to deal with the design, and I feel it is not historically significant.
Robert?
Yeah, I don't think it's historically significant. The design of what's being proposed just is really inconsistent with Chatham.
Yeah.
It looks like they just took every square inch that they could and added it into a box.
Yep.
So,
Okay, all right, at this point, now we deal with what we can. Mr. Lear, I guess we need two motions, one relative to the historical significance.
I move the Chatham Historical Commission finds that the buildings located at 14 Pondview Avenue are not historically significant because it does not meet any of the definitional criteria in section 158-2 A, B, or C of the bylaw. Therefore, the commission does not impose a demolition delay.
I'll second.
Second, thank you very much. Any other comments from the public for or against the application? Seeing none? Okay, Bob,
Yes.
Stephanie,
Yes,
Bob Stevens,
yes,
Don Aikman,
Yes.
Sandy Porter,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate your patience with us.
Thank you. I do have, in terms of a pattern for Chatham, I have to tell you a brief story. Several years ago, my brother Michael was visiting from California. I was driving around showing him the town. And he said, A lot of the houses look the same. Do you have something that requires them to look this way? I said, no, people like them when they look that way. So,
Yeah. Thank you very much. If you could pass that along to your client, I'd appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, that's it on, and things, just quickly, we have Mr. Kean under new business for a community preservation application. Staff, do me a favor, when they come to the CPC committee, would you remind them they have to come, quotes, have to come to the Historical Commission, and B, they should submit copies of the application. There was a little bit of confusion. But in this case, I don't think it's a problem, and I'll let Ted go on, because this is not technically a new application, although it's a new application for funding. But Ted wants to give us a quick overview for us in the community of what's happening.
I'm happy to. Ted Kean, Coastal Resource Director for the record, representing the town regarding the application that we put forward to the CPC for the U.S. Coast Guard boathouse that used to sit on Stage Harbor. I'm sure all of you folks are as familiar and probably even more familiar with this boathouse than I. Just for the record, the first image to the top left shows the Coast Guard boathouse when it sat on Stage Harbor with the Marine Railway in front of it, and noted in the red pointing to the vessel, I'm sure you all recognize that, is the famous, so to speak, motor lifeboat 36500 associated with the Pendleton Rescue. So anyway, as I indicated to the CPC last evening, the boathouse, as it resided in Stage Harbor, became kind of a white elephant, frankly, for the Coast Guard. They weren't using that type of facility any longer. They offered it to the town for $1, and we turned it down because it, at that time, seemed to be a white elephant for the town, unfortunately.
You know, by the way, excuse me, Ted, that $1 was not only for the building, but it was also for the land,
Yikes.
which is probably worth a couple of $1 million now, but we won't talk about the town and decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. I didn't know that aspect. So anyway, again, it ultimately was again offered to the town in the early-ish 2000s. Once again, the town really didn't have a viable use at the time for it. It was then subsequently removed, stored in Quincy for a while. Then it was moved to Hull because Hull apparently, or an entity in Hull, had a potential use for it. And then that use never came to fruition, and it was slated for demolition, and private folks in town had a grassroots organization, if you will, to purchase it. It is now back in Quincy, and they then offered it to the town again for use. It has, is my cursor working? There it is. So, in fact, I don't even think this is the site or the picture sitting in Quincy per se, but this is essentially what the structure looks like. It has been sort of weatherproofed since this picture, with some roof treatments and other treatments to kind of keep it, you know, from further deterioration. Structurally, it's in pretty good shape. It's was built very well back in the day, internally and structurally with the members, but it obviously needs a substantial facelift. So it was offered back to the town. We were actively involved in developing the site at 90 Bridge Street for waterfront improvements, a key feature being a new upwelling facility. The footprint of the structure that we were designing around, kind of in keeping with the goals of the improved capacity of the facility, was almost identical to the footprint of the Coast Guard boathouse. So there seemed to be a match here. The private owners, offered it to the town as the new upwelling facility. We kind of did a quick switch gears. We assessed the building. It seemed to work well. Definitely needs, obviously, some internal modifications, but the structure itself would work, essentially identically to what the building that we were pursuing at that time. The footprint is shown on this pier here, which is obviously a new pier with a public access walkway around it, public floats, et cetera. I didn't note this last night, but nonetheless, this gangway here is designed as an ADA accessible gangway. It's the only one in town, frankly, that would meet those specifications. Modest addition over here for this pier, et cetera, but this is, again, I don't want to get off topic of what, we're here to specifically discuss. So the intent is to have the waterfront features of the site done ideally and hopefully this coming spring and into summer probably. We are pursuing the dredging component in the next few weeks. We have already received bids and tentatively awarded that contract. So that, phase of the project should be, coming up in the near future. Essentially, the goal is to rebuild or reestablish this in its original livery. Basically, the same message I provided to you folks last year. We are not changing the overall look of the building to any substantial way. We are adding like a personnel door here for, better egress in and out of the building. A very minor change over here would be louvers for the upstairs generator system that will be incorporated into the building. The overall size and shape essentially is as was, or is as is, so to speak. We are going to, I don't have the colors in this one, but the treatments of this building are going to be, basically the same as the original livery. Again, just for, the views, different views. This is from the water, looking at the building with the large, at the time, the original configuration for boat access and so forth. This one would be more utilized on a, regular basis by staff. This one has equipment and so forth right behind it. Those would be raised only probably when we're, getting access to the equipment for maintenance and so forth. And then again, I just highlighted the louvers, the door here, and the window treatments are pretty much the normal as they were. This is the view from Bridge Street, from the road view. Again, there is and will be another access garage door over here. That will be utilized a lot by the staff bringing product and material into the building. Again, a personnel door. And then this side, again, with the louver, basically, essentially no change to the building. And then you've seen this picture before. This is kind of the rendering of where what the site would look like with the building. As I indicated again last night, this is a very classic style of a boathouse. It is, was essentially the model for boathouses of this nature throughout, I believe, the nation. There is one very similar building like this in Nantucket as an old Coast Guard boathouse that has also been converted into a shellfish facility. So we're kind of, repurposing this into, I think, a very important and valuable program for the town and trying to restore and bring back the, Stage Harbor Boathouse and put it to good use. So the request before the CPC was the same as last year. We had an estimate of approximately $700,000 to do the exterior treatments, roofing, siding, shingles, et cetera. At the time, the CPC was uncomfortable granting us the whole amount, and they gave us $350,000, half of the request, with the understanding that we'd come back this year and ask for the second half, which is what we have. So we are, again, just trying to finish up on what the original request last year was and looking for the other $350,000.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Effectively, what we're doing here, we already approved it.
Your mic.
I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Ted. I think what we're doing here, what we're doing here is just reestablishing, hopefully, or reaffirming our support of this project from an historical preservation point of view. And looking over at Don, I don't know, it was 10 years ago, maybe longer, that he and I were involved in helping to move it from Morris Island, Stage Island, up to Quincy with Dave Doherty, who's really the principal person that's got to be thanked, to make this happen. But it's a classic adaptive reuse of an historic structure. So from my perspective, it's just great. I think in addition to Nantucket, there's one in Menemsha, another
Yes.
boathouse. I'm not sure if it's an Upwell, or are they still using it as a Coast Guard facility?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, but I know when you sail into Menemsha, it's there right on, staring you when you come in. Anyway, so any comments or any support? Are they
I just have a related question, I guess, for Ted. The other agencies in town, is zoning and HBDC, have they seen this? And,
Yes, and improved.
okay,
So we're good to go.
right.
Just got to find the cash. All right. Any other comments from anybody? No, I guess general motion would be just to authorize the chairman to reaffirm in writing to the Community Preservation Committee and the Historical Commission support. So I think I just made a motion.
I was about to say so moved.
I'll second.
So any other comments from the public or anyone else? Okay. Bob,
Yes.
Steph,
Yes.
Robert,
Yes.
Don,
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it and your efforts. So
Thank
you
you.
think dredging this summer? I mean,
We hope to be dredging in the next, few weeks. So getting the site prepared.
so we're still a couple of years away before this thing comes forward, before it sails back.
If everything moves well, we hope to go out to bid this spring to do basically the site preparations, establish the waterfront features, the bulkhead, the piers, the foundation for the building, and then, in theory, bring back the boathouse, essentially a year from now. Because
Okay.
then, ideally, the foundation would be in place and we have a place to put it. We don't want to bring it back until we have a spot to sit it on.
Thank you very much, and hopefully we will get the kind of support from the town meeting that we get in the previous one. Right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, next item on the agenda is to review the completed update of the 2009 or 2008 Townwide Archaeological Survey Report. And we have Holly Herbster, principal of PAL. Holly's going to be coming forward. For those of us who've been around a little bit, we worked with Holly the last time, and when we did the actual survey, the Historical Commission, a couple of years ago, when there was the work being done at the Atwood and also at the Nickerson Family Association, the archaeological digs, we felt, and because the PAL was very actively involved in other archaeological surveys in town relative to the sewer, that it was a good time to update the report. And so Holly's here to give us a quick update on where we are and the next steps. Holly?
Thank you very much for having me. Again, Holly Herbster at Public Archaeology Lab. A little bit of background, PAL is a company that's been around since 1984 or so. We work across Cape Cod, New England. We do a lot of work in Chatham. We've done a lot of survey work in Chatham. And the work that we do, cultural resource management, is primarily focused on compliance, so federal and state compliance projects where there's funding or permitting. As Frank mentioned, we've been involved, actually, I looked since 2016 on doing archaeological assessment, survey, monitoring for the comprehensive waste management plan across town. So that's one of the bigger projects that we've worked on in Chatham. But in addition to that, as Frank mentioned, we completed the 2008 original townwide survey. I was the lead on that project, so I'm happy to say I'm still with us and still working on archaeology here. So I just wanted, for those of you who weren't on the commission before and for those who are in attendance today, to just do a real quick summary on the original survey. It was the original survey, like the update, funded by the Community Preservation Committee with funds provided by them, overseen by the Historical Commission and the Massachusetts Historical Commission. So even when there's no digging involved, which neither survey involved any kind of excavation or testing, the Massachusetts Historical Commission, through the State Archaeologist's Office, does require you to have a permit for the work. That ensures that the people who are working on the project are qualified. We all meet the Secretary of the Interior standards for archaeology, and also so that we follow, rigorous methodological process, and that we provide a written report at the end of the project to document the work that was done. So when we entered the project in 2007, the original survey, there were a total of 66 recorded archaeological sites in Chatham, so sites that we knew about that had been identified in the past. The majority of those were ancient Native American archaeological sites. Those have been primarily identified by avocational archaeologists, people who had collected materials on the exposed surface. So in comparison to that, at that point in time, the town had 1,000 recorded historic structures and buildings, so a real sort of mismatch between the above-ground and the below-ground historic resources in town. At the end of that 2008 survey, we were able to document, without any digging, just through research, informant interviews, walking and driving over the town, 12 additional archaeological sites. And that report stands today as still a really important document that you as a group can use and that can be valuable because it included an extensive amount of local background research. We spent a lot of time in town working with different historical groups and agencies to collect background information. Really incredibly fully developed historic context, both for ancient Native American land use in town and also for all of the historic periods. And we also spent a lot of time talking to citizens, to members of the community. We had a couple of public events. We did a public lecture at the end of the project. We had a day when we asked people to come in if they had artifacts or knew about sites to have them identified. So there was a lot of interaction with the community. And even though we needed to do this update, the original report is a very important resource to have still. So moving into the current survey, we didn't want to duplicate any of the work that we had done before that was still relevant. So the budget for this project was much smaller. We were much more focused on collecting new and revised information about what's changed in Chatham since the 2008 survey. One of the important things that we did when we did the original project, our mapping was not as advanced as it is today, so the current archaeological and sensitivity maps that I'm going to be showing you shortly were all completed using a GIS system. They're crisp, they're clear, they can be easily overlaid with other things such as assessor's parcels or conservation land or soils or anything like that. So the information is much more easily utilized in different platforms than it was in 2008. We also provided updated management recommendations, which I'm going to go over conclusions and management recommendations briefly today. And we updated the guide that we put together for using the archaeological sensitivity maps. So the user's guide and the sensitivity maps are going to be public information that can be shared with the community. They don't have to be kept confidential. So by way of background, before we started the update project, the earliest known archaeological site that had been recorded in Chatham dated to about 8,000 years ago. So that's a significantly ancient site, but it's not the oldest that we have in the region. People have been in New England and on Cape Cod since about 12,000 years ago. And prior to collecting information for the update, none of those really early sites have been documented in Chatham. We know that there was this very active, continuous presence of Wampanoag people in Chatham after the period of the first settlers arriving. That's a pattern that we see across Cape Cod, but it's particularly evident in Chatham, where there were significant Native American communities and habitation areas into the 1700s and into the 1800s, and I'm sure Wampanoag and Native people are still living in Chatham today. Sites have been recorded in every part of town, not necessarily equally divided, but there had been archaeological sites across all of Chatham's different sort of ecological and geopolitical zones. And the sites that we knew about, as I mentioned, have been primarily identified through avocational work, but also some limited professional survey, CRM survey, like the type of work that I do, through local research, and then also through accidental discovery. So in other words, sites, or in many cases, unmarked human burials that were identified accidentally during construction. So the one thing that I will point out as I continue through with my slides is that in Massachusetts, as in most parts of the country, the locations, the specific locations of archaeological sites are not public information. They're considered confidential. That is primarily to protect them from individuals who would try to loot them or who would go to look for artifacts on those sites. So even the maps that I'm showing you today, the way that the Massachusetts Historical Commission maps sites in their electronic system, you'll see them as large boxes because the very specific details about the sites are only allowed to be shared with property owners who have sites on their property, towns and commissions, agencies, federal, state, local agencies who need that information as part of project review or for planning purposes, and with professional archaeologists who are credentialed and who are able to access that information. Okay, so as part of this update, we continued to break up the town into these different zones, which were helpful for us for identifying different types of resources and different types of environments. So this has really nothing to do with where archaeological sites are located, but as you read through the report, it's just a good way for us to kind of focus in on particular parts of town. So for the most part, we divide up the zones into coastal areas, and then we have sort of the central Chatham area, which is the only part of town that doesn't include coastal wetlands, although there are obviously some estuarine resources that come in. There are certainly wetlands there, many of the kettle ponds in Chatham. So this is just a quick overview of how we sort of broke down our analysis of the different sites and sensitive areas in Chatham. Really, there's not a lot of difference from one part of town to the other. It's just a good way to kind of break up how we're talking about things. The one exception is the Monomoy and Nauset zone, which in addition to currently being disconnected from the mainland, that's not always been the case, the sort of environmental conditions on those two outlying areas are quite different from, obviously, from the mainland areas of Chatham. So as I mentioned, this is a screenshot of what the Massachusetts online MACRIS program looks like. So that stands for Massachusetts Cultural Resource Inventory System. This is a view of the known archaeological sites in Chatham, and those are shown up in green boxes and red X's. And then the areas that show up on this map right now in orange are areas that have been surveyed. So this is a really important addition that we didn't have access to in 2008. We can actually log into this system. We can see what areas have been surveyed. The little numbers that show up on the screen are references to the report that's been filed for that investigation. And it also, if we zoomed in, we would be able to see the site numbers, and archaeologists would be able to look at the different archaeological sites to get more detailed information. So this is a really valuable resource that archaeologists use. It's also something that the state archaeologist and the Massachusetts Historical Commission goes to when they're reviewing projects as part of federal or state permitting or funding. So the recorded archaeological sites in Chatham, they're similar today to what they were in 2008, although we have some new information that I'll talk about in a minute. The ancient Native American sites can kind of be broken out into some general categories, so they include things such as individual artifacts, somebody who's picked up or identified a stone projectile on the ground or in an area. Small special purpose activity areas, so for example, a place where hunting may have occurred or where resource gathering happened. Larger village sites, which we recognize archaeologically as sort of complex areas that maybe cover acres in size and have a lot of different activities going on where people came back to seasonally over and over again. Shell midden features, which are probably the most common and typically seen by the general public, so often exposed along wetland margins as very dense, thick layers of shell, and those typically represent food trash waste middens. Lithic workshops, so primarily collections of chips from stone tools where people were working on creating or repairing stone tools. And then also individual and clustered burials, for the most part unmarked on today's landscape, so not any kind of visible evidence of them, which is why, unfortunately, they're accidentally discovered quite often. For sites that date to what we refer to as the post-contact period, so after the 1600s, after the time of the first European arrivals, in Chatham, as I mentioned, we see a number of sites that document indigenous households, homesteads, cemeteries, meeting areas, as well as Euro-American colonial homesteads and home sites. There's been some very limited documentation, primarily based on surface finds archaeologically of some of the windmills and saltworks that were in town. Meeting houses, lighthouses at this point, that just includes Monomoy, the lighthouse on Monomoy. Burials and cemeteries, both marked and unmarked, primarily marked cemeteries from the historic period. And then also there are a couple of recorded offshore shipwreck archaeological sites in Chatham, none of which have been investigated by archaeologists. They're just known as the location of a wreck where there's still physical evidence, underwater. So the archaeological sensitivity maps, these are the updated maps, and as you can see, most of the town is still considered archaeologically sensitive. An important thing to keep in mind is that these are very, very generalized. We don't have the ability to kind of drill down to individual parcels at this scale. So in areas that are sensitive, there are obviously many small areas, every little parcel where a house is located or where there may be some kind of structure is not necessarily going to contain an ancient Native American archaeological site. But one thing that we noticed as part of the survey is that really since 2008, there haven't been any large-scale developments in town. So in other words, there haven't been any areas where acres of land have been transformed from, undeveloped woodland to housing development or shopping malls or anything like that. So unlike some of the towns where we've done these surveys, Chatham has remained relatively consistent in terms of new areas of development. So when we are targeting sensitivity or doing the assessment for most sites, either pre or post-contact sites, a sensitive area is where we know there's already a recorded archaeological site. Areas that are relatively undisturbed or completely undeveloped, an area that has the types of natural characteristics that would have been attractive to people. So for ancient Native American sites, that includes level sandy soils, access to fresh water, access to saltwater resources. For historic period post-contact sites, that includes proximity to transportation networks, to raw materials, to clusters of, community activity. And then also sensitive areas are those where there are known historic structures, so houses from the 16, 17, 1800s and other buildings. The only really areas that we determine are not sensitive at all are those that have really been extensively disturbed. So large areas of municipal or commercial development, wastewater treatment areas, places where there are landfills or dumps, new landforms, so for a lot of the sort of Nauset and Monomoy zone, it's really difficult to capture sensitivity because the soils, the actual above grade landforms are constantly shifting. So it's really difficult to be able to identify archaeological sensitivity in those areas. And there are certainly areas that are submerged today that were dry land, hundreds and thousands of years ago. So that doesn't mean you see there's not a lot of sensitivity on the Monomoy and Nauset areas, but that doesn't mean that there isn't the potential for things to be there. And then typically we don't consider wetlands to be archaeologically sensitive areas that are underwater or have saturated soils, but there's an asterisk there because sites that are associated with maritime activity, docks, wharves, salt and windmills that were tide mills that were located in or at the water line, those would be considered sensitive if we have a reason to suspect that there was something there historically. So the results of the work that we did as part of this updated survey, we started out after the 2008 survey with 65 Native American and 13 post-contact sites. In that intervening period, those totals have been brought up. So now today there are 79 recorded ancient Native American sites and 19 historic sites. So there's still a disparity. There are still many more ancient Native American sites that have been documented than there are historic sites. The majority of the sites that have been identified in those intervening years have been identified through cultural resource management surveys. So it's a good testament to the success or the value of doing those archaeological studies in advance of new construction or new development. And two of the bigger projects that were identified sites based on CRM work were that Chatham CWMP project that I talked about. We have done a fair amount of archaeological monitoring for below ground construction. We've done a couple of archaeological surveys at the pump station locations that were sensitive and identified a number of small archaeological sites as a result. None of them stopped the project. Some of them required a little bit of revision to planning, but in general, CRM work, even at a significant site, doesn't end up stopping development. There may need to be some changes, but typically the project goes on. And then another really important project was the work that was done, not by PAL, by another firm, in two different phases at the Chatham Airport. And I'm going to talk about those sites a little bit more in a minute, but this is an area in the interior of Chatham. It doesn't check off all of those sensitivity markers that I had mentioned earlier, but there were some significant findings of both ancient archaeological materials and historic period sites within the airport property. I've already mentioned there's been relatively little change across town, so we didn't have to change the sensitivity too much. A big change since 2008 is the number of unmarked burials that have been identified or human remains, both through people reporting human remains that have been exposed through coastal erosion, so people who have picked up or identified what they think may be human remains on the beaches. And then there have been quite a number of unmarked Native American burials identified accidentally during construction. So these are projects where there's no requirement to do archaeology ahead of time, private property. There's no mechanism really to require there to be archaeological survey, and there's not really a way to predict that there could be burials there, but they have been documented, and there's a protocol that goes into place when human remains or potential human remains are identified that is discussed in the report in more detail. So the project I mentioned at the airport recovered some projectile points, some stone tools that stylistically date to that earliest period of human occupation that had not previously been documented in Chatham. So a really exciting, really important find. Not in an area that necessarily archaeologists typically expect to find those really early sites. So in an interior area, there are some wetlands nearby, but not substantial wetlands. And then there was also, through erosion on Morris Island, a local resident collected or picked up a projectile point, a stone point, that individual shared with Fish and Wildlife and other archaeologists, and that was also determined to be a tool that was probably made about 12,000 years ago. And it's interesting at the shoreline because 12,000 years ago, Morris Island would have been an elevated area, and most of Cape Cod Bay would have been dry land. So sea level rise has created, the bay, but at that time that would have been dry land that wouldn't have even been near the waterfront. So I think it's a question if that tool may have been submerged and brought up through tidal activity, or if it actually eroded out of the bluff on Morris Island. So both really important, really interesting new discoveries in Chatham that helps us fill in some of those gaps in the archaeological record. Another really important addition to the archaeological heritage of Chatham is the work that has been done and continues at the Nickerson home site. It is, at this point, one of the most thoroughly documented early first period home sites on the Cape. And even in New England, there have not been a lot of properties that have not been that weren't significantly altered. As you know, in Chatham, many of the earliest houses were either rebuilt or expanded over time. So this is an example of a site that really was utilized and then no more activity afterwards. So the archaeological signature is really somewhat intact and pristine. And in addition to it being a really important archaeological site, the work that Craig Chartier and PARP and the Nickerson Family Association has been doing has really promoted a tremendous amount of public education and outreach, which is really important for archaeological site protection and preservation. The other thing I wanted to mention is that the cemetery, the historic cemetery Form E updates that you recently had completed by Dan Zotto, his research identified a number of potential archaeological sites and resources associated with those cemeteries. So kind of a little extra bang for the buck, if you will. I was able to take those newly completed forms, and because of all the research that had been done, able to identify some areas of potential archaeological sensitivity around those cemeteries. So that includes some of the early meeting houses, some areas where there are potentially unmarked burials beyond the marked boundaries of the cemetery. So I just wanted to put a plug in for sort of combining some of the above ground work with archaeological sensitivity can be a really helpful thing. And another great thing that came out of this survey update was finding out that there are so many known archaeological sites and sensitive areas that are located in land that has been permanently put into conservation. There is no better protection for archaeological sites than to leave them alone, to not have archaeologists like me dig them up. While we would love to get the information, really conserving and preserving sites for the future is the important goal of archaeologists today. So it was very heartening to me to see that so many sections of town are in conservation right now. So summarizing, the CRM work that folks like I do are really targeting only specific types of projects. So again, if you have something going on in town that doesn't require state or federal permitting, funding, or licensing, which that covers a lot of the work that goes on, a lot of the development in town, it's unlikely that there will be a trigger to have an archaeological survey or even an assessment conducted. Sometimes you don't need to do any digging, you just need to do a little bit of research about the area. We still have in Chatham an underrepresentation of archaeological sites. I think that the proportions are about the same today as they were prior to our original survey. So now there are 98 recorded archaeological sites, and the above ground historical inventory has grown to about 1,300. And 350 National Register listed resources, which is an incredible amount. So congratulations to your commission and to the town. One thing that is definitely highlighted as part of the survey is that really there are very few historic period non-native archaeological sites that have been identified and documented in town. So the Nickerson home site aside, at this point, we still don't really have a lot of information about many of the historic resource types that could be here in town, other than through documentary information and historic context. So I leave you with some of the recommendations that are in the report. These are just sort of the highlights. I would like to say that doing the periodic survey is a very important thing. Chatham is the first community in Massachusetts to do an archaeological reconnaissance survey update. So this project, I spoke with the Massachusetts Historical Commission when I applied for the permit. This update project is going to serve as a template for other ongoing updates to projects. So currently, PAL is working on an update to the town of Dartmouth's survey, which was completed in 2002, so that's been an even longer period of time. But the work that we did, the methodology we came up with for this survey, the Massachusetts Historical Commission has identified as a good template for other communities who have done a survey in the past and would like to do an update for, without having to go through the effort and the cost of the full survey. One of the recommendations is for the town as a whole and the Historic Commission specifically to consider if there are any local review mechanisms that you can enact during the planning process to at least consult with the archaeological sensitivity maps and work with property owners and proponents to see if there are any ways to sort of assess the archaeological potential for individual parcels within those, large-scale sensitive areas. You also should make sure to rely on the support of the Massachusetts Historical Commission. They are there to assist local historical commissions and can provide expertise. They have access to all of this information that I'm showing you today. They will have this updated report. And also the Cape Cod Commission. So I'm sure you know Sarah Korjeff at the commission, historic preservation planner, and I definitely encourage you to utilize or continue to utilize their professional expertise when you might have a project before you, or if you're looking for some advice about how to approach a particular local situation that doesn't have one of those higher level triggers. Also, considering archaeological sensitivity as part of looking at parcels of land to put into conservation. Again, it's sort of a win-win when you have a piece of land that has unique or special environmental attributes, and you can also say it's archaeologically sensitive, or there's a known archaeological site there. That can be a good way to sort of support and promote picking out areas for land conservation that aren't currently protected. Continuing to educate the local community and contractors about what to do if human remains are identified, because this is something that has happened so often. The report includes, as one of the appendices, a document that the MHC publishes. It's called the Know-How Number 4. It's a public document, and it's step-by-step what to do if you think that you've encountered or exposed human remains. It's a very important thing for people to know and to stop work if they see what they think are human remains, and there have been a number of those situations in town that have resulted in very little damage to a burial site because the contractor or the developer or the person who's doing the excavation has stopped and has called somebody. So if you as a commission can help to promote awareness that there are procedures in place and that it's a very simple process to stop and make a phone call, I think that would be great. Partnering with federal agencies, certainly the National Park Service and the Fish and Wildlife Service, who manage and own the offshore lands, for funding, for public education. Both of those agencies have professional archaeologists on their staff who can potentially assist with either public education programming or potentially coming together with funding if there are projects that you're interested in pursuing, and also with the Mashpee and Aquinnah-Wampanoag tribes, who both have tribal historic preservation offices with staff who are specifically tasked with identifying, evaluating, protecting historic and archaeological resources. And as sovereign nations and federally recognized tribes, they also have the ability sometimes to bring a little extra heft to a project if it's brought to their attention, or a review to maybe help find some funding or some regulatory mechanism to have some type of archaeological assessment done on a property. And then just to continue to support and promote public education, public awareness about archaeology. I think Chatham is doing an excellent job Right now, again, the Nickerson project is really a shining example of the benefits of including the public in archaeology and making people aware of the important heritage that the town has. And that's it. Thank you for having me. I'm happy to answer questions if you have any, or when you've had a chance to read through the report, if you haven't, to certainly follow up after today's meeting. But
Wow.
thanks very much.
You know, everybody, I think I provided copies of the report. Did we, to all the members? No, we didn't. Because the report that we have so far is the unredacted report. And so as soon as we get the redacted report, I expect everybody to read all 95 pages of it, and there'll be a quiz. So it's really a fascinating document. For those of us who were around the last time, you know, there's a great introduction about the history of Chatham, and I think it's just phenomenal. A couple of quick observations, if I could. You know, I'd like to thank the gentleman to my left here, you know, Mr. Bob Lear and the Chatham Conservation Foundation. More than once you mentioned the issue of land in Chatham, which is protected because of conservation. Not just the foundation, but also Chatham Conservation Commission. You know, the town has been able to put a lot of land in conservation. I mean, some people today would say too much because we don't have enough housing, but okay, that's another story. But, you know, I think, you know, it's just really great work that's been done. I think the work that you did as part of the wastewater treatment plant was interesting, and I don't know if the members of the commission are aware that every time Bob Duncanson was digging up some street or some location, you know, it was required that the PAL, which I think was the agency that was pulled in, so, you know, there were a lot of different places in town that we normally wouldn't be digging, or we take a look at what's actually there. And that I think is really great. The other item, just quickly, is, you know, you mentioned to be used for planning and zoning. Fortunately, Mr. Briggs, Jay Briggs, who's our building commissioner, happens to be in the audience for another reason, but, you know, it certainly is a tool that we would hope that the planning board and the zoning board, you know, have it in their desk, you know, take a quick look. I mean, you know, we don't have authority relative to that, but they do, you know, and if there is a particular property that is archaeologically sensitive to, you know, we can't say no all the time, but we could ask people to take a look, and that I think it would help us to preserve some of the activity. I guess last but not least, we have Robert Nickerson from the president of the Chatham, of the Nickerson Family Association here, and I think, you know, we're going to be talking more about that. Members of the board, any specific questions or comments? Yes, Don.
I'd like to second what you just said about the Conservation Foundation and our esteemed head of it, Bob Lear, and also thank you for a very, very informative and inclusive report. I never knew that they had found some objects along the erosion site at on Morris Island, and it's been very informative, and I'm humbled that here we are in 2023, and people have been here for 12,000 years. That's just incredible.
Thank you. I wanted to add, and I'm sorry to interrupt, that I should have said this when I was speaking, but those two sites at the Chatham Airport have been protected and preserved. So the Cultural Resource Management consultants worked with the town to map the boundaries of those archaeological sites, and I don't know exactly what was proposed, but the work was shifted, or the potential work that was going to happen in those areas was revised, so the sites have been protected.
Was it kicked off because of federal money being used?
Yes.
That's,
Yeah.
that's the
Any,
key
any
thing.
work that goes on, I think within the airport boundaries is also subject to review by the FAA.
Mm-hmm.
I believe that was part of it. So it was definitely federal agent, it was a federal as opposed to a state agency that triggered that need for cultural resource management.
I would, just a quick follow up on what you said relative to the public. When we did it in 2008, Holly came back to town and gave a talk. When with the commission, we did it History Weekend, and I'd like to ask you once again, in 2024, there's a group in town called Historic Chatham, and they have a History Weekend, and maybe get you back, come back again and present this to, I think the public would be very interested. I'd like to think
Sure.
that there are about 500 people in town watching this meeting, but I don't think so. Okay? So, but I think if we do that and publicize it, I think it would be very important, you know, to the community to realize the understanding of the history, you know,
Yeah.
not just the last 100 years that we get involved in, but the last 12,000 years. I think it's great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And in speaking with Chris, I think that there is a real a benefit to informing the public because really, community members are the eyes and ears of sort of what's going on in town in areas where people go walking or around where they live. You know, I think that they can be really good advocates for keeping an eye on and monitoring sites where people are doing illegal digging or sites that are eroding, whether it's natural or human-caused. You know, there are a lot of ways that archaeological sites can be damaged and destroyed, and informed, you know, community is the best sort of resource for making sure that those sites and areas are reported as kind of up the chain so that somebody can take a look at them, so.
Any of the members of the commission have any comments or questions?
Just briefly on the Conservation Foundation side, we're trying to, or have an obligation to be monitoring our properties for just the things you talked about in terms of people doing things that they should not be doing. And I guess one of my questions is, I did look at the prior report. I did have access to the redacted version, and to say that they were unhelpful on being able to really identify
Sure.
related to our property, what
Right.
might be going on there. So
Right.
there is a mechanism for our organization to say, here we are, we're thinking about putting a new trail in.
Yep, absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
And that's actually one of the recommendations in the report, is that even passive recreational development, such as putting in trails, creating parking areas, doing some of the accessible improvements to a property, they do have the potential to impact known or unknown archaeological sites. So I will make sure that the foundation receives the information about sites that are on the properties that are owned and managed by the foundation, because that is important information that you should have.
Good, thanks very much.
Yeah,
You know-
and thank you also to the foundation, again, I'm sorry, I thought of one other thing, for the really informative historical signage that's on a lot of your properties. When I was driving around town doing the survey, I was really impressed by the amount of information on some of the properties, including, you know, historic maps, a lot of information about even ancient land use on some of the properties, and I think that's, again, that speaks to the commitment, you know, to sort of understand and make community members aware of the deep history of Chatham, so.
One question, Bob, a few years ago, the foundation, when you were updating your maps, asked for access to the unredacted report, and at the time, the town said no. How does that work? I mean, would they have to contact you, or
Well, my rationale was, when I looked at the unredacted version, was that I'm vice chair of the Historical Commission.
Yeah,
Therefore, I've got
right.
Well, that's true
different
too,
way
but-
around, that's
Right,
all.
yeah.
But
Yeah, I mean, you know, the point isn't to sort of be draconian about keeping that information out of people's hands. I mean, certainly land stewardship and land stewardship organizations and owners should have access to that information. And it's certainly, you know, as the professional archaeologist who prepared that report, the original and the follow-up, we can certainly provide it to the foundation. And I think the way to sort of just make that official would be to to just provide a cover letter with a copy to the Massachusetts Historical Commission so the State Archaeologist's Office knows that that information has gone out. And then just to ask that the confidential information be, just carefully controlled and only made accessible to people who need that information within the foundation leadership. I mean, that's really all it's about. It's about making sure that those very specific locations aren't, put out on a public website or made available for somebody to copy and take away from there, so,
Okay,
Not a problem from our point of view.
great.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you so much. I
before you
appreciate the
go,
time.
any members of the public wish to have any comments or questions? You mentioned Chris Seifert, who's in the audience, as our town archaeologist, I guess. We know that Chris does a lot of work in town on that, and hopefully was helpful to you. But Holly, thank you very much. You're going to stick around. We're going to have a brief meeting after this meeting. All right, guys, we'll be getting you that report soon, and I think it's great reading. Even the redacted maps, I think, are quite fascinating. Okay, we're going to move quickly here. I don't want another 2.5-hour meeting. We had a question or a comment by the gentleman to my right relative to the enforcement of conditions specified in Historical Commission determinations, as well as ramifications of noncompliance. That's a fancy way of saying we got a lot of oopsies. And, Jay, would you come up to the microphone? Just Jay Briggs, who's our building commissioner, and myself, and I know Mr. Lear have had some long conversations with Jay relative to the process, and I just wanted you to comment quickly on the process, on how you see it. You also have in your packet some correspondence from Sarah Korjeff about, what is done, but it looks like we're doing the right thing. But why don't we just, for the members of the public and the members, ask about that whole issue of, the enforcement of conditions specified in our determinations. Jay, I don't want to put you on the.
Jay Briggs, Building Commissioner for the town of Chatham.
Yeah.
I thought we were just going to have a discussion about it, but I mean,
Yeah.
as you know, recently, what we've done when we found whoopsies, as you call them, we've used stop work orders. I think a stop work order is a very effective tool to get someone's attention, know we're serious about the project. We all hope and believe that applicants are going to do what they propose to do when they get their approvals. Not always the case, and I understand some small changes are necessary, when the owner gets involved and they want to change windows or things of that nature, but there's a process for them to reach out to the committee and have those approved. But I guess your big thing is the stop work order versus fines. I mean, I have the ability to fine through the general bylaws up to $300 a day for a historic violation. It's actually the largest fine available in the general bylaw. They range from 50 all the way up to 300. But, I've stayed away from fining contractors or applicants for a number of reasons. The bottom line is we want to help these people get through their projects, but we also want them to do what they say they're going to do. So the fining process, I have to write a ticket every single day of the violation and deliver it to them. I can't just write one ticket and have it last throughout the violation. I have to write one every day and get it to them. So I might have to send it certified mail or deliver it to them in person. And then to collect those fines, might have to go to court to do so. So I'd rather work with the applicant as best I can. I don't always find out about the violations right away. I mean, fortunately, you folks monitor a lot of these projects, and when you see something that looks out of place, you'll call us up so we can go out and take a look at it, which happened most recently at 75 Main Street. And then I just have to go out and verify that, yes, indeed, it does look like they exceeded their approval, and that's when we start the ball rolling with the stop work order. We try to reach out to them and communicate with them, but they really have to go back through you again to make the situation right. I can't do that.
Can I ask one quick question on the fines?
Sure.
Is the fine, well, okay, you're being fined because you didn't follow the rules, you didn't follow the determination. And is the fine in a place until it's corrected?
Yes. For every
So-
day that the violation exists. As long as I write the ticket. If I don't write the ticket, then they don't get fined on that
Yeah.
particular day. So.
But I guess the biggest issue we have, and I know Don comment, and I'm calling him out, so to speak, was sometimes it's too late. You know, the historic materials are gone, you know, they're in the dumpster, you know, and you can't recreate it. And I guess that's our dilemma, you know, on just to where do we take that, you know? If it's in the dumpster, it's gone, there's nothing you can do, and how do we deal with that? Don, I'm sorry, you had a comment,
Yeah, Jay, in the past, we've had issues. There was a house on Bridge Street that was demolished beyond, not beyond, but, yeah, beyond what we had approved. And there was one on not Stage Harbor Road, but one of the main streets, Old Harbor Road,
Yes.
where the builder was required to redo what he had done, had demolished with historic materials. So he had to go out and purchase those materials because, as Frank just said, the original ones were in the dumpster and gone. Is that something that we can require, or is that something you have to require? Or I know fines $300 a day for 10 days is nothing in a $2 million project. It's, I mean, a chicken feed for the contractor and the owner. But can we require replacement with historic materials?
I'll have to check into that, and I think that's something that you could request. Whether or not it can be enforced, I'll have to find out. I don't know. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of old boards hanging around someplace, but there are companies that do collect them, I think. There may be one in Rhode Island, but I don't know. But I'd like to have that looked into if you could. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you very much. You know, there's two sides of this that you brought out, Jay. We don't view ourselves as the historical commission police, but I remember years ago, good old Jane Moffett said that we should assign a member of the commission every time we make a determination to monitor it. Well, I've been here too long, and I didn't sign up for that. You know, this is bad enough what we're doing here now. But, so we do rely upon your office. There's no question. When I say your office, the town, you know, that they be checked. And I don't ask a question. I have a philosophy, don't ask the question unless you know the answer. But how often do you monitor a project? Is it just strictly the dates of inspection?
It's for the milestones of inspections that we go out on a regular
Okay.
basis, unless we receive a complaint. And
Okay.
people aren't shy about calling up and saying, hey, I think someone's exceeded their authority, or they're
Yeah, okay.
working on the weekend, or what have you. So we might make a random spot inspection, but for the most part, because we're so busy, we can just go out for the scheduled inspections.
I guess it's going to fall upon us to make sure when we have a particularly sensitive project. I'm sorry, Don, you were going to say something.
I just had an aside question. On the subject property, I've had a phone call from, excuse me, from a neighbor who heard building work being done at 7 o'clock in the morning on Saturday morning. Is there a time start for workmen to start on a building project?
There is no set time. I mean, a lot of people talk about it. There have been things published by the police over the years. Good common sense. I've seen recently 7 a.m. to 7 p.m., but I know some of the police documents say as late as 10 p.m. They're not supposed to work on Sundays. Paid workers aren't supposed to work on Sundays. Homeowners can work on their property on a Sunday, but if contractors are on the job, they're not supposed to be allowed to work on Sunday. But Monday through Saturday is reasonable, and I think 7 AM would be about the earliest that would be a reasonable start if you're making noise.
So they can start at 7.
Yes.
Thank
Okay, well, the last thing, I guess, quickly, maybe more comments, was that Christina, just quickly, Christina and I, and we need to take another look at our determination, okay? And I think Christina was going to take a look at it. We do, and, it's right in there, relative that you have to notify us, and it's just something maybe we have to take another look at of making it more bold, and, I don't know, and I think Mr. Ford, Michael Ford, the attorney who was here at the last meeting, I think some towns make them sign an affidavit, and so that's something we'll look into. It's on us to make sure that when the applicant is there and we're approving it, that he knows, hey, just pick up the phone, call Jay Briggs, call this commission, call community development, and just let us know you got a problem, and not do what they did. But anyway, I'm sorry, Bob, you were going to say something.
Just a brief comment on Jay's analysis of the usefulness of fines. When I was on the Conservation Commission, which does have fining authority, there was a particularly egregious situation in which the fines were until the matter was remediated. So it went on for a long time at hundreds of dollars a day. The perpetrator refused to pay and went to court, and the judge clearly didn't want to hear it. So it just, go away and, make it go away now, kind of thing. So there is a problem with that, I think.
That's
And,
what I hear from other building commissioners. If they do go to court to obtain the fees, the judge usually just throws the fees out, so nobody actually collects the fee. So it's like an empty threat.
Response to that, I guess, and Don's comment, that the commission had also ordered a massive remediation plan, which was not subject to those same appeal rights. And I'm sure it cost the guy far more to remediate what he had done wrong than it did to deal with the fines. So that serves a dual purpose, as getting the materials back and providing an incentive.
Okay. Any other comments? Jay, thank you very much. I really do appreciate, help us focus on the issue, and
You're welcome. Thanks for
we'll be
having
in
me.
touch. Thank you. We have one more specific, why don't you just go and break a break? All right. Members of the commission would like a 5-minute break. We'll reconvene at 12 o'clock on the dot, which is lunchtime. Control room, I apologize. We're going to take a 5-minute break. Thank you. Okay, guys. Yes. Bill? Why don't you come on up? Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to continue the December 5th, 2023 meeting with the Historical Commission, Chatham Historical Commission. We had a brief delay. The last item on the agenda that is worthwhile for us to discuss at this particular point is a gentleman by name Bill Horrocks. Introduce yourself formally, Bill.
Hi, my name's Bill Horrocks. I live at 26 Ivy Lane in the old village of Chatham, and the contributing structure is on our property. Several weeks ago, Christina delivered to you copies of a spiral-bound book, which we call the founding document. Hope you all got it and had a chance to look at it. What this is the final approved registration form for inclusion of the Old Village Historic District in the National Register of Historic Places. It was submitted to the National Park Service in 2001 by the Chatham Historical Commission and the Old Village Association. Both your commission and our organization, the Old Village organization, are co-sponsors of the Old Village Historic District. A little over a year ago, I had a chance to see one of the only two original copies of this document, which were available to the public in Chatham. One was at the library in the reference section, while the other was in the archives of the Atwood Museum. And I was amazed when I read this document. It's not just a dry series of papers which give some information, but it is really a very full of historical information, lots of text and so on. Anyway, I saw this document and realized that people should have a chance to see this. We at the Old Village Association are trying to educate people on the importance of preserving our architectural heritage, and one part of that is in education. So the more people that get a hold of this document, which came down now as about a 160-page booklet when it's finally printed. Anyway, I got the idea that it would be good to have it available, so I talked to my friend at the Digital Commonwealth and at the Boston Public Library. He agreed to digitize it free, as they do, and it was published. It was made into a PDF, which was posted online at the Digital Archive. That made it available to the public, but at the digitization involved all the pages, including the blank ones, and so we got together with some people in our organization, and then with the help of Kim Longworth, one of our directors, and others, we reissued it in print with some new features. There's a foreword by Carol Pakin, who was one of the founders of the Old Village Association. They made a table of contents and a detailed index of all the properties in the Old Village, so one can look them up and find out where they're mentioned in the text. So I thought that would be useful to a lot of people. We have a newly formed committee in the Old Village Association, the Preservation Committee, dedicated to the active furtherance of efforts to save our architectural heritage. And of course, wide dissemination of the founding document is one of the interests of that. So we wanted all property owners to have it, and also officials of Chatham, and anybody interested, all people that are interested in the welfare of Chatham as part of our plan. Our committee members are going to be alert for any projects or building projects in the district which we feel might damage the old village. Neighbors will be consulted and made aware of what is planned and what can be done to ameliorate any situation that looks like it might be problematic from a preservation point of view. The Chatham Historical Commission, that's you, has the responsibility to review plans of property owners wishing to modify contributing structures. And we applaud the great work that you've done over the years in this area and appreciate that lots of these decisions are quite difficult. You determine whether or not a proposed change constitutes a significant alteration, and if so, designated is referred to the Cape Cod Commission for final decision. Fortunately, most applications which propose more than a 25% increase in floor space are rare. With our new committee in place, we can now offer as much help as may be required to come to a fair decision in controversial cases. Prior to the scheduling of a hearing, we'll be happy to do any historical or other research that the commission would ask us to do to save you people some time and effort on that. So please just ask us if there's something we could possibly do to help out in this case. We also, one thing we would like to have is, and this is totally up to you people, we'd like to have an Old Village Association representative present at all hearings of these any controversial cases which appear before your
I think that
commission.
exists.
And
Bill?
we would like,
Well, I mean, we have members of the board.
well, somebody, we want somebody who's not on your commission itself right now.
Oh, okay.
Who, this person would be here and and when called upon by the chair, could comment on an applicant's proposal, answer relevant questions, and communicate our analysis of the application after it's presented and discussed. In cases which your commission, the Chatham Historical Commission, decides to go to the Cape Cod Commission, the Old Village is prepared to attend any such hearing and argue the case from the historical preservation perspective. Finally, I hope you find the founding document interesting and useful in your work on historical preservation. And we realize the difficulty of the Commission has as a co-sponsor of the Old Village Historic District in the National Register and as the adjudicator designated by Chatham to balance the wants and rights of property owners to modify their dwellings against the mandate to preserve a historic district. We hope to make your tasks less burdensome by offering as much help to you as we can. So please call on us, and we'll try to help you out whatever way possible.
Well, Bill, thank you very much. I do appreciate, Don, you want to quickly jump in? Well,
No.
let me just quickly finish my point. I appreciate your comments, but, and I've been on this commission too long, and, Nancy Orr and other members of the Old Village.
Yeah, Nancy, I believe, was the chair of this committee
Yeah,
at
right,
the time
yeah.
of the
And Norm Bacon
2001 when
before
it was.
that. So I guess my point is that I think the Old Village association in the Old Village has had a significant impact on the Historical Commission. And, you know, you got to remember we have 3 National Register districts in town. The Old Village, now we have the South Chatham Village,
Yeah.
and we've got the Marconi RCA district, and we also have a significant historic district in town. So, you know, Chatham's pretty lucky, and we try to deal with them all equally. One comment relative to your book, you're mentioning the referral to the Cape Cod Commission. You know, Chapter 158 plays a significant role, and to the years I've been on the commission.
I'm having a little bit of a hard time. With
Chapter
your-
158.
I can't read like I usually do with your math.
Chapter 158, or demolition delay bylaw, has a significant role also. So we don't just hear in any application, especially in the Old Village or any National Register district, with just the issue of the National Register district, but also Chapter 158. So, you know, the 25% for referral to Cape Cod Commission, you know, it's something we really don't, you know, get involved in usually. But I do appreciate your comment. And, you know, whether or not we want to decide to have a special representative, I would point out that I have one alternate on the commission. There's also an open position for a second alternate. So any member of your Old Village Association who would like to really become helpful, you know, please sign up. We'd love to have you. And,
Okay.
And I appreciate, you know, people coming and providing comments, but, you know, I think being part of the commission, you know, really is where the rubber meets the road. So I do, you know, reach out to you. And I'm not trying to belittle in any way your comments for help, but, you know, the public is always welcome, any public. Yes, Don?
I have had the privilege of getting one of these copies a couple of weeks ago and went through it very carefully. And Bill, I'd like to thank you for doing an awful lot of work that to accumulate and put together this document that is very, very informative, and even I, who have lived in the Old Village for a long time, found it extremely informative, and it's very, very well done. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you, Bill.
You're welcome. Also, I might mention that in conjunction with an earlier talk here, there's 3 pages in this document about archaeological description of the Old Village. So
Yes.
we're not
Yeah.
the writers of this were not unaware of that.
Well, I'll tell
thing
you
that
one
I'm
thing-
sad about when I started this work, largely most of the architectural and historical writing had been done by Candace Jenkins. And so when I found that out, I said, oh, I'm looking forward to Candace. She didn't live here in the town. She lived up in Belmont or something. But then I found she died in 2010.
Yes, she did.
At
Yeah.
a very young age of 59 or something. And the other the person listed as the co-author in the front of the thing was the lady who was chair of the Chatham, of the Massachusetts Historical.
Betsy Freeberg.
Yeah, and she's
And I
dead
know her
too.
very well. Unfortunately, she's left also.
Yeah.
Yep. People
So
move on.
it's
One thing I definitely will do with this bill
there aren't
is,
too many people. Carol Paikin is about one of the only people who was really heavily involved. I mean, there are other people like Eleanor Gelsey, and you mentioned Lancey Yaw and so on, but so we need to remember these pioneers who did the spade work, and people like Don and here, sure he contributed a lot back in the day. We were still summer people at that time, so we didn't get involved in this thing as much as we might have.
I actually have a similar document for the South Chatham Village
Oh,
Association.
you do? I'd love to
When
see that.
Our same application, but the concept of preparing a booklet, you know, it's an interesting idea, because I know we took the South Chatham Village Association, you know, document, and we have it, you know, in the town records, but it's interesting to have it in the library, too. Bill, thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you very much for all your work.
And I'm sure we're going to be talking.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I think we've killed it. I had a couple of other things that I wanted to talk about it, but, you know, nothing that's very serious requires our immediate attention. And it's very possible that December 19th, we may not have a meeting because at the present time, we don't have any applications, nor potentially January 2nd. So the question is, do you really want to not be around that long? Anyway, so, you know, it's possible. I'll have to make a decision on just what we have to do, that we may not have meetings in those 2 dates. And if that's the case, I wish everybody happy holidays and everything else like that. Any other comments? Motion, Mr.?
Motion to adjourn.
Thank
I'll
you.
second.
All right, quick roll call. Got to find my list. Bob?
Of course.
Of course. Stephanie?
Yes.
Robert?
Yes.
Don?
Yes.
Sandy?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you very much, guys.